The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everybody, it is Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder of Alldus, and a part of our ServiceNow Federal series. I'm very, very happy to welcome Yolanda Inchauregui, who is Manager, Support Account Manager at Federal within ServiceNow. Yolanda, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yolanda, so we are going to talk a little bit about your day-to-day role, but we're also going to talk about the role that you do as a volunteer as well. So it's going to be kind of multifaceted, and the questions that we're going to share today, I think, are going to give people a fantastic insight to the work that you're doing in Federal, but also to the work that people may not know if they don't come from a kind of a veterans background, and some of the work that you actually do on that. So thank you very much for joining us on the show again.
Thank you for having me. Super excited for this conversation.
So Yolanda, how did you actually get into the world of ServiceNow? What's your background?
So it's actually by chance. My background, it's not in tech. My background has been DoD through military, and then DON, Department of the Navy, where I did process improvement. And, after a long time of being there, or that being my background fully, I kind of took a leap of faith because, funny enough, the processes are very outdated, right? I did run into the challenges that I felt like I was working with the dinosaur processes. And, in process improvement, you can only improve so much if you don't have the right tools and the right mentality, right? And when I was there, it was a time where, things were, we have been doing it this way kind of environment. And so I took a leap of faith. And I joke with the Admiral that I was surprised that we didn't still use carbon copy paper, because our processes were very manual. We relied heavily on Excel, SharePoint, emails, even walk into people's cubicles for certain things. And so I knew I wanted to go into tech, and I didn't know exactly how, just because, again, my background has been, purely federal. So I actually was talking to my connections, and a friend worked at ServiceNow, introduced me to ServiceNow. And I'm not kidding when I say this, but it was love at first sight. I walked in, I got a first mini demo, and I remember saying, oh my God, DoD needs this. Like, everybody needs this. And then it just happened to be that they were growing their federal team, and I understood their customer because that's where I came from. So 5 years ago next month, I joined the federal team.
I think it's wonderful, and it's funny because we've had Herb on the show, we've had Jonathan on the show who worked in government before. Herb, who is a veteran too, and the wonderful thing with that is you can see within the environment that you're in the positive application this technology can bring, right? Because you've actually it's empathy on steroids, because exactly, or design thinking on steroids, you know exactly the journey people need to go on and how you can make it more efficient, right? So I think that's wonderful how they've actually come together. So when you look at the role that you have in support account management, tell us a little bit about kind of the day-to-day that you're involved in, and what does that involve for you and your team?
Well, there's never a typical day. I describe the support account manager's role as a roller coaster. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast. Sometimes, you go up, you come down, there's some spins. Sometimes it feels like it's never ending. But in the end, you get that good feeling of like, and no matter how scary it was, you feel like a sense of accomplishment. That's how I describe my team's work, right? Support account manager is a role that is part of Impact, but it's a support role. We're one of the squad members. And we're the ones that get called when something breaks. And when I say something breaks, it's not, something breaks, but something's not working right with the platform, right? My team doesn't fix it, but we're the single point of contact and the liaison into support or operations, engineering to help resolve the cases or escalations quickly. We work very closely with the customers, the partners. We get called in the middle of the night or odd hours when there's a P1. My team helps with answering, support-related questions, helps with managing their cases, their problems, their changes through resolution. We coordinate product discussions with our internal teams. We do escalation oversight and coordination. And then we meet with the customer on a regular basis, to go over their reporting and go over some of the, their cases, their problems and changes. So it is a little bit more reactive. You don't get heads up when something breaks, although having a SAM help, having a support account manager helps with becoming more proactive rather than always reactive, right? But at the end of the day, it's still a support role. So the SAM helps through, monitoring the customer's instances, and we can kind of see the warning light when something is not working as it should and kind of get ahead of it instead of waiting until the customer says something's not wrong. So that's why I use the roller coaster ride analogy, because and it really depends on the health of the customer's instance and their platform, what that roller coaster ride will look like.
And it's interesting because in the world of government projects, there's strict deadlines, right, that you need to hit. So working within a team, you mentioned the kind of a roller coaster, ups and downs. What have you found has worked well in terms of your management style to keep everybody on that journey, particularly across the kind of high pressurized moments?
To be honest, having a good team. I credit my success as a manager to having an amazing team. And, I go back into before you even hired, right? When I'm looking to hire people, I'm looking for that missing piece to the puzzle and, bringing what I don't already have to create a more, well-balanced and diverse team, because I can't have two of the exact same pieces in one puzzle, right? So that's one of the major things, but then it goes beyond to building trust and relationships, right? You can't manage teams. You can't, do projects successfully if you're working with people that don't trust you or that you don't focus on building that trust and building those relationships. So I emphasize that a lot within my teams. And that helps even more so when you are working under pressure, right? When you do have that good relationship, when that team trusts you, that customer trusts you, then you can deliver news that may not be exactly what they want, but they still trust you. And that helps, right? And then from there, you go into prioritizing, right? I'm a perfectionist, so that in itself can add pressure. But I always ask myself, is someone dying? Is this life or death? And if it's not, which in most cases it's not, then you can prioritize accordingly. You're able to think rather than to panic. And then from there, I go into managing expectations. It may not be the answer that you want, but is it a fair answer? Are we going about it the right way? And that's the part that is very important to me, right? In my role, there's, we have to get comfortable with saying no. But again, going back to that trust, if that customer trusts you, if my team trusts me, and, then you got to leave some room for error, right? Nobody likes them. Nobody likes the error. But again, we've already established that it's not life or death. So if a mishap happens, then we can take them as a learning opportunity, right? And so in support, there's naturally a lot of pressure. But again, I can't be that person that panics, right? And so, I can't tell you how many times I get calls where, they're saying, we're going to call the, such and such executive. And because I follow these things that I really believe, are a good method, then I'm okay. Obviously, I never want my executives to be called. I always want to be able to manage things, at my level and never get, escalate them. But if they do, then I can talk to making sure that we were fair, that things were handled.
And the good thing is on that, because you can't control those other variables. So this is, you're staying within the process, you're giving confidence to your team to stick to the process and work through it in a way, because you just have to be able to respond and as best as you possibly can, rather than react. And that's a delicate dance that I'm sure there's going to be different days that goes well or not. If we kind of segue a little bit more into your role also as global veteran co-chair role at ServiceNow. We kind of alluded to a little bit at the start of the show, but it'd be great to talk about a little bit more about that. And also, it's fantastic because you've walked this journey yourself as a veteran, so you kind of know about it just as much as anybody about the importance of the role. So maybe you could start us off from the top, but what that is, what that looks like, and what that looks like day to day.
Yeah, so it is an add-on role right outside of my daily role. And it, a couple years back, ServiceNow started employee belonging groups with it as part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion effort that they're driving, and one of those belonging groups being the Veterans Belonging Group. This year, I became the global co-chair along with my co-chair Tracy Miller, and we have the executive sponsors for this one. It's Kevin Haverty and Pat Casey. And the goal is to advocate for veterans throughout ServiceNow and create an environment that supports veterans and helps their career development, right? We want veterans to feel welcome and to be welcome. We want them to be known, included, supported, connected, and help them overcome some of the challenges within the veteran community, right? So it's an ongoing process, right? You can't, change things overnight, but slowly we're sort of dealing with some of those challenges.
And actually, just as a bit of a backdrop for someone who doesn't come from a military background and doesn't necessarily understand much about what those challenges may be, can you expand on what challenges veterans face in the corporate world, and how does ServiceNow support military veterans in overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it, and you said it correctly, right? If you don't come from a military family or a military background, then you don't know what you don't know, right? And so it's a lot of the times you don't understand the value of a veteran because you don't know exactly what they did while they were in active duty. So translating those military skills into corporate world may seem very difficult for those that are not well versed in the industry. Most people think, your military is carrying a rifle and shooting a weapon, but that's not the case, right? We have all sorts of jobs within the military. So that being one of the big ones, right? How do we get, veterans to come into corporate jobs at the right level with, and showcasing the skills versus people just thinking, weapons and shooting, right? Another one is the stigma around PTSD that is, highly attached to veterans. Yeah, there are veterans that have PTSD, but not everybody that is a veteran has PTSD. And those that do have it doesn't mean they're this not job or whatever you want to call it, right? So kind of, educating around those things. A lot of the things is that we have veterans that don't self-ID because of the stigmas, right? Because sometimes instead of helping you, it kind of hurts you. So people don't want to, self-identify as a veteran. Like I know I didn't. When I came into ServiceNow, employers ask, check the box, and you don't want to do that, right? And so this is an effort where we're trying to get people comfortable to, one, those that are not military to understand the value of a veteran, and those that are veterans to kind of feel welcome and supported here at ServiceNow. And that's just not for US veterans, that's globally, right? And the challenges globally is that military service is looked upon differently depending on the country and the region. But here at ServiceNow, we want to value their service. We want to support them. And some of the things, again, we're doing the employee belonging group where we're sort of addressing some of these issues. And then ServiceNow also is helping veterans, transitioning veterans come into tech roles, right? Through a skill bridge program that we have. I myself have hired 2 veterans out of that program onto my team. And I can tell you, they're great success stories.
One of the things that I was quite interested to know was your ability to speak multiple languages, and also you've lived in, close to 30 different countries, if I'm not mistaken, and embraced that different types of lifestyle. How does that help you to suppose, analyze different types of situations, problems, and probably having that kind of different types of approach. Because I'm guessing your brain is probably wired in a variety of different ways because you've got all these different types of cultures and, colloquial, different types of work in there.
Yeah, thank you. I love this question, and I'll tell you more why once I answered. But yes, I've lived in about 8 different countries and traveled to 45 plus. And my international exposure is probably the one thing that I attribute to, making me more personable. There's never a time that I can't find something to talk about with someone. And naturally I'm a social butterfly, but the international exposure, I believe it makes you more open-minded, more curious, more accepting, and also like it gives you this hunger to learn, right? It feels like you don't just check the box of a place you travel and you're like, oh, okay, I checked it. I feel that the more you travel, the more you want to travel. But it's not just the exposure, right? It's what, if your willingness to immerse yourself in that culture and learn about the culture and the differences. Because for me, I grew up in Mexico, so you only know what you know, right? And so if you told me, I lived in Japan, I love the culture, I love Japan, but if you told me when I lived in Mexico to try raw fish, I would have been like, no, because for me, Mexican food was the it, right? But through exposing myself, I learned that, there is more than just my way, right? And we all think that way. We think that my way is the way, but somebody on the other side of the world is thinking the exact same way because that's all they've been exposed to. And so the more you expose yourself and you are open to, then the more, you become more receptive to other people, other cultures, other ways of thinking. So I literally consider myself, a citizen of the world. And the reason I ask, or I say that I love this question is because I actually ask this question in my interviews. I ask everybody that I interview to tell me, if they traveled internationally. And again, because I feel that it makes them a more well-rounded person.
Yolanda Inchauregui, thank you very much for being on the podcast today and sharing your experience.
Thank you for having me and showcasing the military and veterans world and how it works with ServiceNow. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.